Board of Public Affairs for the regular board meeting of July 20th, 2021. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Mr. Sprow couldn't be here tonight, so I'll take his place. First on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the June 15th, 2021 regular meeting and the June 28th special meeting. Board members, you've been supplied with a copy of those minutes. If there are no additions or corrections, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I see them, Jim. I'll make a motion we approve the minutes for the June 15th and the June 28th special meeting as written.
Second.
Dick?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Annette?
Yes.
Next is a hearing of public concerns. Anyone present tonight that isn't on the agenda that would like to address the board? Seeing none, Clerk-Treasurer's report.
The board's been presented with the Clerk-Treasurer's report for the month ending June 30th, 2021.
Any corrections? If not, I'll accept the motion to approve.
Move we approve the Clerk-Treasurer's report. I second it.
Karen?
Yes.
Annette?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Next is a presentation of the water towers inspection report.
Yeah, Derek, our water superintendent, had the Fountain City and the Bryan Tower inspected, and he basically from Suez, and Daryl Bowling gave us a quick presentation. I was really impressed with what he had to offer, so I thought it would be important for the board to hear the condition of our towers. So, Daryl, you want to?
Yes, thank you. Nice to meet everybody. I'm Daryl Bowling.
Welcome.
I do work for Suez, and yes, it is the Suez Canal. I always get that question all the time, is it related? The answer is yes. So, old company, if you will. I live in the Tip City, Ohio area, just north of Dayton, and travel around Ohio. And Suez has been around a long, long time, and we do a lot of things. So we're actually in about 74 countries, and there's kind of a picture of us from the United States. We have about 6,000 municipal and industrial customers. We manage about 8,000 assets, including water towers. So we know our tanks, if you will, right? We did about 1,900 renovations in 2019. 2020, we all know, is a little different with the COVID piece, so we didn't do as much in 2020. And then the other big piece of it is we're ISO 9001 certified company. So what that means is everything we do has processes oriented with it from a quality assurance piece. That's saying make sure you get the product delivered the way you should get it. So we are ISO 9001. The neat part about that is that we cannot step on site at an industrial customer, you know, a General Motors, an AK Steel. We can't get in any of those places without the quality assurance piece of an ISO, and that's something that you benefit as well from that, okay? So let's dive in. Before we dive in, my request of you as a group is if you have a question, stop me and ask it. It's great dialogue. Some of the things I see are second nature to me, and I might skip over it, and you might look at it and say, what is that? So please ask questions as we go. It'll make it a better conversation. So first of all, our Suez program is compliant with the Ohio Revised Code 9.29. We'll talk about that later, and also with the Ohio EPA Asset Management Program. So everything we do is compliant with the Ohio Revised Code and with EPA. I want to throw that out there now. We'll talk through the tanks and we'll circle back to that, and we'll catch a little bit more of that on the back end, okay? So what have we done so far? To Nate's point, we've inspected both of the tanks. They were inspected by a NACE inspector. A NACE is National Association of Corrosion Engineers. So it's people that are certified to understand coatings and corrosion, right? How exciting. So that's what they do though. They inspect assets, they look at them, and they try to understand the life cycles left. Are the coatings still in good shape? Can we paint over something? All those kind of things. So Both your tanks were inspected by a NACE inspector. Looked at for compliance for AWWA, which is American Water Works Association, which kind of is the one that governs for compliancy. EPA is kind of the police to those compliance, right? So AWWA kind of sets it, and then EPA kind of monitors to make sure you're following it. Also looked at from OSHA 10 state standards, Homeland Security. So we come in and look at your tanks, your assets, to figure out where are they and where are they deficient, and where are they okay, kind of a thing, right? The 5 areas of concern everybody focuses on is the coatings. Understand what the system of what the condition of the coatings are, external and on the inside water chambers come into contact with your drinking water. A sanitary is the water chamber locked up, so there's no way that anything can get in, that kind of a thing, right? Security, structural, and safety, right? And then paint samples are collected, sent off to a lab, so we understand what the current coatings are on the tower, and also wanting to know if there's any lead or chromium on there. So if there's lead or chromium and we're sanding on that, we have to make sure we're protecting our employees from and handling any of those leads. What you're concerned about it is you don't want any of that on the ground or in the air, because you're responsible for any of that lead or chromium. That's because you own it, if you will, right? So part of the process is understanding what that is, okay? Everybody good? So here's a chart we use. It looks kind of basic, but it's very, very critical to the whole piece of this. At the top is labeled the exterior coating degradation over time. Coatings over time, here's our steel water tower, has a primer, if you will. It's a zinc-based primer. It then has an epoxy mid-coat on it, and then some sort of a top coat. This one's a urethane along the way. The only thing the urethane does is makes it look pretty, right? Because this would look pretty dull. And the epoxy does not like sunshine, so this protects it from a UV standpoint and everything else. Over time, the sun wears this down, and you have to paint over it, right? You kind of want to run this not all the way to a failure. You want to get your useful life out of this before you paint over it. If you wait too long and this fails, I don't know if you've ever been going down the road, you see a water tower covered up with a big curtain over it, then they're blasting all this off and they're starting over. That becomes an expensive process. So the goal is to get the useful life out of this, and then to paint over it if you can, as long as these coatings are in good shape and all those kind of things, right? So this is kind of a chart we look at. The green area on there means, yeah, you can overcoat it. We're in good shape. When it starts to drift down further, it becomes issues that says, hey, we may not be able to overcoat it, we might have to blast it, and then that costs more money. So you don't want to have to get there. So one of our goals is understanding where your 2 water towers fall on this chart, right? We good?
How long does the epoxy last?
The epoxy is this mid-coats. What you don't want is to get to that. This is the urethane on top. Great question. It depends on a lot of variables, but it tends to be in that 13, 14 year kind of a window before you want to paint over it. This is designed. If you've ever walked up to something and rubbed your hand on it, you get chalkiness on your hands. Mm-hmm. That's the natural degradation of the coating, if you will. That's the natural life loss, and that's okay. What you don't want to do is wear through this and get into this, because this starts to crack and break. Then you can't overcoat it as well. But to answer your question, on a bell curve, 13, 14 years is an overcoat window. There's different coating systems. Some last longer than others. It's hard to give that exact answer, but think of that 13 to 14 year window. So we looked at the Fountain City tank first. Flew by drones. We got Nate and Derek had to sit through hundreds and hundreds of pictures. I pared this thing down. But we did a drone flight around it. We could see a lot more from drone and climbed it. Here's kind of an aerial view, just so you can see we have that access tube in the middle. When you climb up that tank, you pop out of that access hatch to get on the roof. So right there where it's labeled access hatch, when you climb straight up that's where you pop out on the roof. There's a bolted manway up there into the wet area, which is perfect for confined space. Confined space from an OSHA standpoint is so critical from a safety standpoint of having somebody inside there that would get injured, right? This second bolted hatch up there is perfect in case you had to help get somebody out or anything. So it's great to have. It's a good thing. You have a roof vent that's in great shape. You're getting your primary hatch to the wet area, obviously in very good shape. And then you have this corral around it with the ringers, a painter's ring, all that kind of fun stuff. So that's what the roof looks like. Most people have never seen those before, because one, you probably didn't climb up there, and two, you've never seen the aerial view. So that's kind of what the roof would look like, okay? Another picture from the side. Another kind of picture there from the side. Another picture showing the bottom. So this style of a tank, I get this question a lot. This style of a tank, as you can see, the bottom part gets some of this mold growing on there, right? As this coating starts to break down, it starts to get, I'll call it hairline kind of cracks and things in it, right? As it's starting to break down. When it's brand new, it's smooth. It's slick like a window. After it breaks down, it starts to get rough, little cracks in there. That water temperature going in that tank, 57, 50s, going in there, sits in the summer, sweats. It all kinds of sits at the bottom. As the coatings get older, it has more places to hang on because it's starting to get these little breaks and stuff. So the water has a spot to kind of trap and hang on to, not getting a whole lot of sunshine underneath there, so it starts to grow and looks moldy. It's a natural process. People try to go and clean some of those off, which sometimes works. If you clean that off now, next year you drove back by it, guess what? It's going to look just like that, right? So there's a point to where it's a little bit of a struggle. There's a point where it gets a lot on there. It's part of that time that we're at the end of the life cycle. It almost needs to be painted, right? So you could spray that off, clean it off, it'd be back. The second thing you gotta be careful you don't do when you spray that, if you put too much pressure on that from a pressure washer, you can actually start to break this down even more and actually create more harm than good if you're not careful, right? So we get into this, where is the tank on this curve, okay? A lot of people look at painting a tank as more of an art, and it's actually more of a science. So this is a standardized test. It's an ASTM test used in the industry to look at how well are these coatings adhering to one another. If these are all falling off, you don't want to go in there and paint over top of it because, as you know, those new coatings will fall off. So part of what this NACE inspector will do is a standardized test. The test is you make an X in this coating. You take this tape, it looks like a masking tape, but it's a reinforced tape. You put over that, and then you pull it off. When you pull it off, you are mimicking the same pounds per square inch as what a new coating system would apply to the tank. We see people all the time painting over something that wasn't prepped right or it's falling off. We all know 2-3 years, that's all going to fall off. It has to, right? So this is a process to try to understand. When you pull it off, to the far right down here, it shows that 0. That 0 is what it looks like, meaning when you pull it off, all the coatings remain they pull off on the tape, which means you have poor adhesion, which means you don't want to paint over it. It means you want to put that curtain over it and start over. All the way over to a 5, which means you make that X on there. When you put the tape on and pull it off, no coatings come off. Somewhere in that red line, that 2.5 range and over is good conditions to overcoat. Something less than that, the recommendation in the industry is to blast it off. We still good? All right. I'm waiting for a question from somebody. So here is that particular X drive, okay? I'm going to make this easier for you to see here in a second. But before we do, there's also a part of that whole process is understanding how many coatings and the thickness of the coatings that are on there. So there's a gauge. This is a picture of the gauge showing the thickness of the coatings that are on there, okay? So there's a gauge they put up there. Top right-hand side, it says N and then 11. Everybody see that up there? The N11 means there's 11 samples taken. So a total of 11 different places around the water tower. Number 2 is a 9.3 with the arrow going down. That means out of those 11 samples, there was 9.3 millimeters of coatings on this. The high was a 29.5 out of those. The number 4 up there, the 16.72 with the X with a line over it, that's the average of what it was. So it had about 16 mils worth of coating on there. The only thing that's a little concerning, it's not horrible, is 9 is a low and 29 is a high, fairly large deviation along the way. So it's something we got to look at and make sure when we start to think about the condition, right? So let's go back to the picture. The bottom right was the picture I just showed you of your tank, roughly a 3.5 on that scale. Over there on the left side, which means it's in a good overcoat position. Everybody okay with that? That film thickness was also a part of it because we like to know that. That's part of that formula. Back on this one, because it's averaging around 16. We like to know what that is. It's like putting shingles on top of shingles on your house, right? There's a point where it can get too much and too heavy that it needs to come off. That 16.7 is still in a very good area to overcoat. So that tells us that the thickness is okay. And then this tells us that the adhesion is still okay. Make sense? So with that being said, we also sent off the coatings to figure out what the coatings are. So we know from a lab what the different coatings are. There's a report that goes with this. So we understand that this is, the outside is a pigmented acrylic, and there's a whole lot more stuff that goes along with that. This is also part from the lead. We checked the interior roof, the side walls, and everything else, and I got them circled there. In essence, you can say there's no lead on the tank. It shows little bits, but not of any concern, very, very little. So this is all good news. We're all saying good stuff, right? So if we have to look at where this tank would be on the scale, we have to say the Fountain City Tower is still in the good, but we're at the end of that useful life. Were you asking that question, how long does it last? You're getting towards that end of that useful life, so it needs to be addressed somewhere in the next couple of years. Kind of a thing, not tomorrow, somewhere in the next couple of years. You also notice that by all that mold drone on the bottom, all those indicators that it's towards the end of its useful life. What you don't want to do is have that slide down further, because that means you can't paint over, you got to put that curtain up and you got to spend more money.
You said a couple of years. Well, a couple of years, do you think, will that put us in the yellow or will that put us down in the red?
No, you'll still be in an okay position over the next. Now, we want to keep an eye on it,
Right.
because here's what happens. It's the dog days of summer. It's freeze and thaw cycles that continue to make this degrade, right? So we're not sitting here saying, hey, you got to take care of this thing tomorrow. But it will be, you'll see in a recommendation to have something done in the next couple of years. You don't want to flirt with that, because by hanging out and waiting, we've seen people wait another year and all of a sudden it's already starting to come and it's starting to fail those things, right?
You don't want to procrastinate.
And you don't want to procrastinate. You still want to get the good out of it, right? You want to get the useful life out of it, but not push it too far. So there's a fine line in there. Good question. So again, there's the side of the tank. Overflow looks good. Everything's compliant with that. We're now on the interior dry. I don't know if you've ever been inside of the tank, but now we've opened that door. We're standing on the inside. Interior dry coatings look good. To be honest with you, interior dry coatings are, the only thing you want to do is protect the steel. You don't see them from the outside, and they're not coming in contact with the water. So you want it to be in good condition, but they don't have to be the prettiest. You just want it to protect the steel, if that makes sense. We're talking about probably putting a safety cable climb on here. There is a safety device on there. There's a cable that's a little bit more safe and secure that a lot of people are using today, so it was kind of a recommendation we kicked around. Now we've climbed all the way up. We're at the bottom of the bowl. If you've ever looked at that tank, there's this little hatch you can open up and stick your head out, and you're almost to the top. So that's where we've climbed all the way up. You can see some areas of corrosion and rust. Nothing to be alarmed about. Pretty standard, pretty typical. What you have to remember is that tank sits there and sweats on the inside. Not only does it drip on the outside, but it sweats on the inside. So a lot of this corrosion and stuff is just coming from time when this thing's sitting there sweating. Something to be addressed, but again, no emergency, if you will.
We don't have, there's not a cable on the ladder on the inside that it's a climb up.
It's a solid pipe that you put a clamp around and you move it as you go and you put your harness on it.
Yeah.
It's just a different style.
It's a different
They
style.
typically use now.
Yeah.
Okay, second.
So we're staying on the interior dry, more pictures, touch up, nothing critical. And then, remember that hatch when I said when you climb up, you pop out on the roof? Well, this is that hatch. Actually, your water is in this whole chamber around there, so you're kind of climbing up a straw through the center. There's actually water all around that little access tube there. That access tube looks fine. Now we pop that on the roof. Handrail's the correct height for, say it's supposed to be 42 inches, it is 42 inches. The vent's in good shape, everything there is nice. Here's the hatch that goes into the wet area where the drinking water is. Yeah, it's got that rail on there, it's different kind of a safety device. And then here's kind of the inside where the water is. I don't know if how well you can see, but water's here, the coatings are there as well. I put a note up here, January 1st of 2023, there's a group, it's called NSF. NSF is the standard that anytime water comes in contact with something, NSF has regulations. The regulations are changing in January of 2023 that basically says you can't have solvents in anything that's touching water to leach into it. So they're really tightening up all those restrictions of what's there. So new coating systems will have to go in place. Your existing ones are grandfathered in. Any coating system that's applied to the interior that comes in contact with water starting January 1 of 2023 has to be a new coating system based on new standards and regulations. So anything we're talking about painting on the interior part after that has to be the new coating system to stay compliant with everything. So kind of a summary of that tank. Overall, structurally, it's a great tank, right? So we're saying overcoat it. Overcoat means we're going to clean this and prep it properly. You put another epoxy on top of this, and then you put another one of these shiny urethanes on top of that. So if you can imagine duplicating these, because we've proven that these coatings are stable and the existing coatings are stable enough to paint over top of those, which is a great thing to be able to have. Okay?
How many coatings like that can you put on a tower before you have to?
Remember that number that averaged like 16?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what we were trying to find out. So depending on the coating system, you can get closer to, call it 35, 40, maybe a little higher. These tend to be about 3 mils each. So to overcoat it, let's use the 16 as a number. If we put another epoxy, we're going to go to roughly 19. And if we put another urethane, you're going to go to approximately 22. Okay? That's going to last you another 13-ish, 14-ish kind of years. And now you're 22. You can do another up to 25 to 28, right? So as you can see, it progresses along. As long as this is done correctly. If something fails along the way, you can't put good over bad, right? So you got to make sure you keep the integrity of the coatings at this level before you can keep doing it. And so far, you're there.
So at some point, then it's all of it's going to have to come off. At some point.
At some point, we won't be sitting around this table to talk about that because that'll be, if done properly, it's at 16 now. It's every 6 more is going to be roughly 14-ish years, right? So it'll be a long, long time. Yes. But you're right, it would. It's like putting the shingles on top of the shingles, right? At some point, you got to take them all off. You're not close to that at this point. The key now is to make sure you do overcoat it at the right time. You don't wait too long. And whoever does it with the quality that you can continue to overcoat it, right? Good question. I'm moving on to the next tower if we're all good. So now we're going to move over to the Bryan Tower. Again, flew the drone around it, same concept along the way. Same curve applies, so we're going to do the same thing. We're trying to figure out where this one lands on the curve. Here's a shot from the roof. Okay, this tank, a little different coating system. This tank had what would have been considered almost like a clear coat. Clear coats were popular 20 years ago for a while. The concept was like putting a lacquer on a piece of wood, right? Trying to make it look shiny, longer, and protecting it. Well, what has happened, based on our analysis, what has happened is that clear coat was missed in several spots. So as you can tell, it ages differently. Where the clear coat was, looks good. Where the clear coat isn't, then it's kind of aged differently. Could have been some other issues about how the coatings were mixed, as it's a part A, part B, some mixture stuff. So there's other speculation of why. Tough to speculate after 15 years. For us to try to figure it out now, but we did some analysis trying to figure it out. So there's a couple things that went wrong. So our concern, the day I was standing out there and we saw some of these drone pics, was saying, ooh, you know, are we still going to be able to overcoat without blasting, all those kind of things. So this was, once we got the drone in the air, seeing some of those.
Darryl, do we know how long ago that coat was applied?
They were done in '04 and '05.
'04? Okay, thank you.
What the top, this overcoat, clear coat does is it extends that life a little bit. You know, we were talking 14 years or so. What it does, that clear coat, tries to be just that. It tries to be a thicker version of the shiny, just like lacquer on a wood, and it tries to prolong that life from 14 years on out. What happens is, when you're applying it, you can't tell where you're applying it. It's clear, you can't see it. So now what happens is you're on top of a tank or someplace, there's even spots on the leg, if you go and look at it, you can see where it's applied or where it's been missed. So there's a lot of spots where it was missed, so now it's aging differently in different spots along the way. The other fear of the clear coat is it's so slick that when you try to paint over top of it, if it has a clear coat, it will actually come off because it's like painting a sheet of glass. So a lot of times they've actually stopped doing clear coats like this. The manufacturers have even stopped making them. They make it a challenge to overcoat. Imagine that slick surface and trying to paint over top of it. Very, very difficult. So one of the recommendations we'll get to would be you have to pole sand it. Now, once you scarify it, rough it up, you're giving new coatings the ability to adhere to it. We'll talk about that in a second.
Darryl, you talking about just the spots that were missed that would be sanded?
Whole tank has clear coat on it.
Okay.
So you'd have to,
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, if they missed those spots, that obviously would have aged differently than the spots that they
yes.
applied this stuff to. I guess I wonder if those spots that were missed are going to be a concern.
The spots will be missed, will have to be sanded and probably primed a little differently before it's painted over, but the whole tank would need to be sanded
Oh, okay.
to be able to get new coatings to adhere properly, right? I didn't notice it at first. When Derek and I first went out there, I drove by the tank once, it looked fine, and as I was pulling in one day, I was following you out there, and I glanced up there, I'm like, what's that on that roof up there? And then we put the drone up, it became very obvious what it was. And you can see how obvious it is on that as well. This shot makes it look obvious, but there's other places on the tank, it's not just there, there's other places that were missed as well. Remember our X, right? So there's what the X looks like there. You can start to see some coatings kind of coming off. We had a couple spots, you can see a bigger piece kind of hanging and it came off. Some of those are concerns. Did multiple adhesion tests around on it as well. Again, still in that 3 to 4 kind of a range. So if I'm you sitting there, the good news is I'm on that left side of that red line where I can overcoat it without having to blast it, right? It kind of lands in the same spot. So it's almost in that same spot. So now we're down to, hey, I got 2 of them in the same area. Which one you go first? They're kind of in the same area. You know, we could arm wrestle. Which one goes first? They're very, very similar to where they are in their life cycles along the way. Although they're 2 separate scenarios, because one of them has this top coat that was missed in areas, and the other one doesn't have that. It's just aging differently, different sets of coatings as well. Sir?
May I ask, probably Derek might, those tanks weren't done together the same year,
One was done in '04 and one was done in '05.
okay, but not by the same contractor.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was thinking there was 2 different contractors.
I
This,
don't think so.
No?
No, I don't think so. I think it was the same.
and I don't know any history on these, I can just say the Fountain City tank painting although when you drive by this one it looks nicer and shinier, the Fountain tank painting was actually a nicer product than what this one was. Now you might drive by and say, hey, don't look that way. There's a lot of things on there from our perspective that's not as good. So the Fountain tank is actually slightly better. Again, lead, chromium, we're fine, no issues there, so we don't have to worry about contaminating anything. The coatings, the samples we sent off, Because if we're gonna paint over it, we need to know what it is, we're gonna have an issue, right? We have to know about the clear coat that's on there. Is there not a clear coat on there, what kind? Because what you don't wanna do is have it, have it fall off eventually. Here's what we mean by falling off. Obviously not your tank, but it is a tank in Ohio. We got a phone call about coatings about 3 years after this one was painted, about some coatings starting to delaminate. If you look closely, you can start to see some of it even from this picture from the ground. As you get closer, you can see it, and then when you're on top of it, you can actually see it as well. So it had a couple things. Clear coat, it was painted over, wasn't prepped properly, all coming off, and then there's even some incompatible coatings being used as well, which is another story along itself. Imagine oil-based and water-based paint, trying to paint over, they don't work, right? There's about 9 different coating systems used on steel tanks, and you've got to find, they got to be chemically compatible to work with one another. We went through on the Bryan tank. We got several samples off of there. Derek helped us find some old information. We spent tons and tons of time trying to understand that coating system to make sure that if we do go back and recommend to you that we know what it is we're doing so we don't have this happen. Here's what ended up happening on this tank. We had to come in and blast it and start over. You're probably wondering what that green is. Well, you know what that green is because I told you earlier. That's the primer under, the zinc primer, right? The question I get all the time when people see this picture is like, well, why didn't you blast it all and start? It will like get a flash rust, a mill scale on it. So when you blast down to bare steel and all of a sudden oxygen hits that thing, it'll start to rust right away. If it gets much rust on it, even rust you can't see, it creates a dust on there. This zinc primer won't adhere properly to the steel. So when you're blasting a tank, you got to blast part of it. Somebody's coming right behind you cleaning it, and then you got to prime it in as fast as you can along the way. That's why you don't just go and blast it all and let it sit. If it sits for a day or so, you can get that mill scale to build up on it, and it creates an adhesion problem. So this is the proper way to go through and blast. So we finished this tank, big curtain, and then we actually changed the paint scheme on it a little bit for them, and that's what it looks like, obviously, today. The only reason I'm showing you these is because if you don't understand the existing coatings and the chemical structure of those coatings and the right to prep it, you can have this same kind of a challenge. Back to your tank, okay? Security ladder in place. You don't want people climbing it along, so that's what you want on there. As a side note, you can see some of that. See the 2 different colors there? That's where they missed the clear coat and not. So you can really see it on the roof, but if you walk up to the tank, you can see all kinds of spots where it was missed, so it's aging differently along the way. Issue, foundation repair, not a big issue, can be fixed pretty simply. It technically should have a security fence around it. Our recommendation is for you to find somebody locally to do that. You don't need us for that, you can find somebody locally, got a fence around there. This manway is, again, perfect for confined space. It's easy to get somebody in and out if somebody, or out if they were injured. This overflow's good, vents good. 24-inch access hatch. Some people like 30-inch, 24 spine. Again, we're back to the interior of this as well. On interiors, AWWA does not have a spec to overcoat an interior. So an interior runs until you start getting corrosion, and then you blast it all out. There's not an overcoat. There's not a spec that can be done. So this will go a few more years, and then you go and you blast it all the way down to the bare steel, and you take it out. So in that case, again, it's different coatings, but it's basically these 2 coatings, and you wait till you have some level of corrosion, and then you go in and you blast down the bare steel and you put a new primer in the epoxy. It's a different epoxy. It's that epoxy that's changing in 2023, right? So it's not leaching any chemical things in your water. But it's different from the outside. The outside you can paint over it if it's in good shape. The inside you have to blast it and start over. The reason why is because AWWA has found that trying to overcoat an interior, it just doesn't adhere properly and eventually fails, and it's kind of a waste of money. So now they don't even have a spec for blast or for overcoating an interior. So you gotta blast it and take it out. Same concept again, there's new liners in there. So kind of our overall summary was this tank being a 2022 kind of a thing, right? Because it does have those areas that are degrading faster, everything else. Clean the tank out at the same time, whole sand the exterior because we got to prep it properly, and then in about 5 years or so, look at doing the interior and other things along the way. This is the highlights of what that scope of work would be that we would recommend. I got a few more slides about some procurement stuff or some pricing things. Anything before we dive into that from the tank itself, from the towers themselves? Good question so far. Anybody? All right. So when I said earlier that everything we do is with the Ohio Revised Code and the Ohio EPA Asset Management Program, Ohio Revised Code has kind of a new procurement method that was installed in 2010, really started going into effect 2011. It said tank asset management is considered professional service. So there's a whole process about bidding, not bidding, because somebody's supplying the engineer. So we're kind of the engineer. We can do the painting, do the whole thing. You got to spread some cost out. So there's a whole level of what it went into effect, like I said, around 2011. So now we have the Ohio EPA Asset Management Program that got kicked off 2019-ish, 18-ish, about saying, hey, we have these large assets like water towers, like stuff in the treatment plant, on and on, that if you don't maintain them, they're going to cost more when you don't maintain them by keeping up with them. So now the EPA is putting pressure on the Nates and the Derricks of the world to keep up with everything, and water towers fit inside of that. So what the EPA is looking for an asset management program is saying, hey, you need to have a program that's maintaining the assets, including the tanks, that says you have a schedule, you're keeping them cleaned out, you're keeping them painted on a regular basis, they're part of your budget, all this kind of thing. So when I say we're compliant with EPA's asset management program, that's what we're talking about, because they have a whole process that's out there. They've even started in some places in Ohio not giving you funding, grant money or any kind of funding, because you don't have some of these assets in a qualified program. Because that's their way of saying, hey, you need to take care of some of your stuff along the way, right? So they're starting to put pressure on it. I don't know if you guys have felt that yet, but we've seen it. And I'm getting phone calls on it a lot. With COVID, it kind of drifted away, because the EPA wasn't out as much or whatever. Now it's starting to get going again, and we're starting to hear more and more about people not being part of that program. So everything we do as well, be part of that program. This is that Ohio Revised Code we talked about. It says it's professional service along the way. 95% of everybody in the state of Ohio uses the professional service piece that makes it also compliant with EPA and the professional service piece as well. And again, we have this whole asset management piece driven by the Ohio EPA saying, hey, you've got to have a plan to take care of the stuff along the way, right? And they're really digging into that hard. So here's a budgetary kind of a piece to this, right? So as you can see on for the Fountain City tank, we're talking about doing that exterior in year 2023. The Bryan, when the exterior was in 2022, with the interiors being redone in 2026 for the Bryan, 2027 for Fountain, and then all these inspections in there is part of what the EPA is wanting as well. The EPA is wanting to know that the hatches are closed, the vents are in place, there's no way that a bird could get in, all those kind of things along the way. It kind of fits that whole thing. One of the methods that we use that follows the Ohio Revised Code is we spread those costs out as well. So if you can see across the bottom, I don't know if you can see them from where you guys are sitting, $156,000 a year over the 6 years. And then at that point, they're all kind of taken care of and brought back to new. And then it would be through a 10-year contract, then these visual inspections that these guys can use for their sanitary surveys back to the EPA, and then keeping them washed out again to make sure they stay in compliant with what AWWA wants as far as washed out. So this would be what a so-called 10-year service contract would
Was
look
that for
like.
both of them, the 156?
That's the two combined.
Two combined.
Yes, sir. I think I answered that right. That's not individual, that's for the two tanks to total.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That just sounds cheap to me to paint both of them.
I can make that higher.
Oh, no. But it just sounds,
They stretched it out over 6 years. Instead of paying
Yeah,
$950,000, they've extended this cost over a
Right.
10-year period, so it's an affordable
Yeah.
way of doing things, so you're not
but I
saddled
just
with
did the
it.
math, and it still seems to me to be, I would have thought it'd been a lot more.
And what, sandblasting, so if you run it to failure, sandblasting's what, another $250,000
You're gonna
on
have on
top
top
of
of
that?
each of those. So that's the goal.
Right.
Get the
To
useful
avoid
life out of it, but no more, right?
Right.
You don't want to do it too soon, but you
Okay.
definitely don't want to do it too late. That's why we keep laying eyes on it. Even the fountain tank we have up there is considered year 2. I think we were talking about this earlier about when, and we were talking about which one goes first. You can make an argument, depending on what you guys can handle here, about taking the tank out of service, to do one and then turn around and get it back in service and then turn around and looking at the other one, right? Now, if we were to do that and do it that way, we don't go back and change the money stuff around. Once we kind of have something in place, if we think that needs to move up, we move it up, but we don't go back and change monies around. Or if we get out here, a little tough to know what this tank's gonna look like on the interior in 6 years, right? We don't know how much ice we're gonna get, scraping in there and everything else. But during these inspections, we're looking at that. And if we think we need to bump that up, then we take all these pictures, sit down with everybody and say, hey, our recommendation would be to move it up. The key to the tank is not having steel loss. Chunk of steel sitting out there, right? It'll last indefinitely if it's maintained. We got a tank that we take care of. They claim it's the oldest one in Ohio. I don't know if that's true or not, but Cary, Ohio, outside of Findlay, 1894. Wow. Is a tank we're still maintaining for them. It's brand new today, right? It's a tank, right? It's steel. So it's what you don't want is steel loss. So that's the game. You want to keep the coatings intact as long as possible without having steel loss. It's the cheapest way for the life cycle costs of that water tower, right? This is what we have, thousands of tanks under service contracts of this sort. And again, it's compliant with AWWA stuff, compliant with EPA. And again, I say it's new, 2010-ish then, they had this as a professional service, and it appeared to be staged that way. Many states have that, and then the EPA tags on the asset management piece that kind of pushes people in this direction as well to maintain those assets. Because if you don't maintain them, to your point, Nate, it's that much more expensive worldwide.
Well, it's good to see we're not under the gun on this. I mean, we've got some time to plan.
A little bit.
A little, depends on how you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it'll be here
Budgeting
soon
starts in
enough.
October.
The Bryan one obviously needs to be addressed first.
Correct, yes. And again, Bryan versus Fountain, there's a thin line between the two, right, on that. So they're both kind of trending towards the back end of it. But neither one's an emergency, to your point, as long as they're addressed somewhere in the next, 24 months or so. And again, that's one of those things that it's, people say, how long can I get out of it? It's like, I don't know, how hot's it gonna be, how cold's it gonna be? Things that are unpredictable to determine the rest of that deterioration. This is hot, right?
I think it'd be foolish not to be proactive on this.
Yeah. It's gonna cost you, it's gonna cost you more.
Yeah, pay me now or pay me more later, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the motto.
I know what direction your budget's heading next year, Terry.
That's all I have.
Yeah.
So I'm done at that point, so.
Yeah.
Questions, please. You guys, great questions along the way. Fire away if you have any others.
I think you did a great job of
Yeah, you did.
explaining it, so
Yeah.
I guess if you don't get a lot of questions, that means you did a good job.
That's good. That's good. Because for us, we deal with it every day.
Right.
We got to continue to remember, you've probably never seen something inside of these things. So you don't want to over talk it and beat it up, but you don't want to skip something that's important. You just want to make sure you hit all the side ones. So yes. Anything else? If you have questions, let Nate, Derek know. I'm not far away. I can answer them, then get back to you. I'll come back in, stop, answer, whatever you guys need, okay?
Thanks for coming.
Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You made it sound
I
pretty
guess
simple, so.
Yeah.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
So these new regulations start 1/1 of '23. So if we do the Bryan Tower next year, will we have that paint available?
That's the exterior coating, that new one's the interior coating.
The new regulation, to Nate's point, only affects the interiors, where it comes in contact with the water,
Yeah.
right? So what that means is the next time they're done, it has to be with the new coatings. They're grandfathered in until then. So our game plan, see the NSF 600, that's that new code.
Okay.
So we've already got built into this what those anticipated costs are going to be for those new coatings along the way.
So we don't have to worry about any new regulations from the outside of it?
That's what we do. We manage and look at all those regulations to make sure you're compliant along the way, because how would you ever know that, right? It's very subject matter specific. And that's what we do to guide to make sure you guys don't step in those traps along the way. So we keep that out there and make sure if there's something that comes up at the time that's an EPA issue, sometimes we'll circle back and say, hey, new regulation going in, we need to make sure we take care of this, along the way. So we try to educate and guide.
Any indication whether the new coating will be as durable as the old coating?
There's not any indication.
It's always a little scary when you come up with
It's-
something new and improved.
It's always different along the way. Matter of fact, we're actually going to start using one of the new coatings this year. We also own and operate utilities on the East Coast and the West Coast, so we actually sit in your shoes on the other side. We own and operate utilities like American Water or something. We're actually going to start using those coatings, the new ones that are out there, inside of our own tanks to start seeing how those things perform on our own stuff to see, so we can answer those questions. So yes. Great question.
Wonderful.
Anything else? Great.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks.
No, thanks.
Appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank
See you.
Nice meeting you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the Airmate water main extension.
Carol's joining us this evening, and we've been in communication back and forth a little bit, and she has asked to come in and speak about her needs. So you're more than welcome to step up and speak to the board.
Thank you. Well, my name is Carol Chack. My maiden name was Schreiner. A lot of you know me by my maiden name. Just a brief update of what we're doing and why we're growing. Airmate Company came to Bryan in 1962, and we were just making drafting instruments, and sales weren't too strong. Through the years we've grown, drafting instruments have gone by the wayside, but we have developed our machining capabilities so that now we're cutting engineered plastics out of sheet for custom components for companies. And if you saw our products, you wouldn't have any idea what it was for. It's nothing like a Spangler candy item that everybody uses. But they're used in large machine builds, and we do some dunnage, which is reusable packaging for automotive and other heavy equipment. Our largest customer builds conveyor systems for fulfillment centers like Amazon and Walmart, so it's all automated. And we just get blueprints. We have to make them to exacting specifications, so everything's engineered and it works seamlessly for the customers. And this year Amazon has committed to build 100 new warehouses in the United States. So a lot of that business is coming to us. We don't make all the parts, but we make a good portion of them. And during COVID, it was stressful for a lot of companies, and some of our competitors went out of business. So it's bad for them, but it's good for us because a lot of that business came our way. I've got a brilliant engineer running the shop, and he's pioneered some methods and produced some products, and we're on the cusp of some new exciting business opportunities. And so looking at that, in the last 3 years we've really grown, but looking ahead, and also our largest customer came to us and said, can you double your capacity for us? So to do that, we have to put a pretty sizable addition on our building. And to do that, for the type of equipment that we have to purchase, we need a clear span where everything is open, and we've got a workflow that allows us to be efficient and to produce the products we need to. So to have that, we need to have a sprinkler system, and we need to have city water for that sprinkler system. We're in the city limits. We came in the city limits maybe 7 or 8 years ago. We got city sewers, which we purchased to connect there, and now we need city water. Got a quote, talked to Nathan, $500,000. Shock, because we've gotten water quotes down the road in the past, and of course, with the way components are priced these days and construction costs, understandable, but still a shock. And it really put a crimp in our plans because we've allocated so much for the building and so much for equipment and so forth. So I did get another quote from S&S Boring, which was a little less because it would be boring under the road instead of digging up the asphalt. I wonder if it can't be, can you put the line north of the road in the ditch?
The sewer runs on the south side of the road, and EPA basically states that you have to be 10 foot from that, so that almost puts you in the road, unless we got an easement, and I think they tried to get easements out there prior to that south side of the road and struggled with getting easements.
What about the north side?
The north side, it would just be, you'd have to go to the farmer, and ask them for easement. So there's a lot of engineering that would have to go into it.
Okay.
So just to be clear, you do understand that $500,000 was a shock to everybody.
Yeah.
But if that estimate would have been 6 months ago, it would have been a different number. If it would be 6 months from now, it may be a different number. I remember it was probably a year or two ago that I gave you an estimate. I don't know if you ever received it, but I was asked to do an estimate.
Yeah.
I wasn't really involved, so I didn't know what happened to these, like 4 or 5 estimates that I found over the years. But I found, I think the last one I did was like $300 and some thousand. So it should have been similar to that. But when you ask for an estimate today, I have no option but to go out and get costs and find out what those costs are. And so,
I get it,
so
yeah.
I feel bad that it was such a shock, but I did say you could use our sketch and it would be less intrusive because I think $100,000 was pavement replacement.
Yeah.
So that's why I suggested that, do a directional boring quote and you might get a better cost, by doing that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just wanted to clarify those situations. I don't want to feel like I'm throwing out, $500,000,
Yeah,
$500,000.
big
It is,
numbers,
it's shocking,
sure.
I get it. But I just want you to know the reasons behind
Yeah.
the numbers that you received.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, that being said, and too bad we didn't do it earlier. Maybe we couldn't have afforded it. I don't know. Too bad we can't wait 6 months, but we can't. Here we are. So, so I'm here tonight to see if there's anything that BMU can do to help us with the cost of this. And my thought was, I first went to the county commissioners because we're right there on Williams County Airport. And I talked to a lot of people who said the airport really should have city water. And I talked to some people on the airport authority and they said, yeah, we want to put a new hangar up. I guess that there's an emergency plan that allocates a hangar if they have to evacuate people and, well, you need a public water source. This sounds like a deal that the commissioners should go along with, and the commissioners have some COVID money. Well, they didn't see it that way. They offered to pay a third of the cost. So it was better than nothing, but it was a little disappointing because the big entity is the Williams County Airport. So anyway, so I'm here tonight to see what can be done if the BMU can assist in the cost of this project.
Carol, may I ask?
Yeah.
You've obviously talked to the county. You are on a well now,
Yes.
so do you have that option? I mean, could the county, did you ask if they could put a well there that you could, get a pressurized
We could put a tank.
expansion tank in
Yeah, we could put a
for your
tank.
water suppression?
Yeah, and we could put a tank in and pumps. Believe it or not, it's pushing $300,000.
Oh, is it that much?
Yeah. And so we felt if we ever need to add on again, and now we've invested this money in this tank, and now we need to get a bigger tank, or then we gotta paint it all the time. So maybe I don't want a tank, but we just felt that the water was the better way to go.
Because I was just wondering, I'm sure the county does have ARPS money or COVID money.
They do, they say they're not sure how to spend it yet.
Well, that's
And-
the county. Imagine that.
Yeah, but yeah, they have that money, and be nice if they could figure out how to spend it, and not just for this project, but
Yeah.
that could do the county a lot of good in the city.
But they did offer initially a 1/3.
Yes.
Okay.
And I just want to kind of fill everyone in too, because Carol and I have spoken, and also I've spoken to a county commissioner, Wedco, Mommy Valley, our engineer, Nathan, we've all been in meetings throughout this. One, the county, when they said we'll pay a third, they put you guys on the hook for a third too in the conversation, so
Oh, really?
just, I guess, kind of
Well,
make
bless
that
their
clear to
heart.
everyone, so that it was split 3 ways, and they were gonna use, of that, they were gonna have you use your $50,000 grant that you got from RGP, and I just wanna give a little explanation to you guys on that. Carol can get that $50,000 grant from RGP because she is a female in business based on the development she's doing. It wasn't intended to put a water line in though, the state intended that for you to go towards building cost or equipment cost, so the true essence of that was actually for the expansion of the business, from my understanding on what RGP put that for.
Yeah.
It's not to say that you can't use it, but that was not the intent of RGP when you became eligible for that $50,000 inclusion grant. You know, I've talked to Nathan about it, we've been very open in our discussions with everyone, and I will also tell you, I talked to a board member from the Port Authority after your commissioner meeting, and it's my understanding that the airport did pass a resolution that they at this time did not want city water, and I think they did that in response to you going up to the county commissioners and saying, if you're gonna put this $500,000 water line in, and then in 2 years, the county airport could just tap into that and get a much less cost to them, that you didn't see that as fair because you're putting in the huge investment to get it out there. I appreciate and understand that, and I don't know if there's a way that we as a government body or EPA could do some kind of resolution for Carol that if she would do that, whoever would tap into it in the future, even if it's not the airport, would somehow pay a user fee back to Carol. And that's something we've kind of tried to work around in our heads. Because I think that would be fair to her, putting, if she did choose to do that large investment on the water line, that someone didn't just come down the road, extend it 20 feet and have very minimal cost at the benefit of themselves, but at the detriment of you.
How do you do that with, okay, well, this is just a scenario. We help you, we put in the water line, blah, blah, blah. Then that becomes a city asset, correct?
Yes.
How do you do that with, I get, in other words, let's say if you paid $350,000 to have this water line put in, all right, it's your money, but it becomes a city asset. And of course, we have tap policy, correct?
Yeah.
How do you, Carol's put all her money in.
And that's just something I was hoping you guys would investigate through legal, and I know
I mean,
I'm
that would be
bringing this on our attorney quite a bit, but it's my understanding that out in the county that happened with a large factory, and they get a portion of the tap fee back. It's not our water, it's out in Holiday City, but there was some agreement made where that company will get part of the tap fee, so there's almost like a larger user fee, so it's not the city paying Carol for that, it's the actual customer that wants to tap on.
The utility years ago used to keep track of that stuff. I think it was almost 15, 20 years ago that we have records in engineering of water line extensions, and then as people tapped in, that money was kept track of. It got to be such a nightmare. Some of this stuff was 10, 15 years old, trying to keep track of who paid what. So it was decided by the board, years ago, that they eliminated that policy. Because if I'm, I think that's the way it happened.
Yeah, and sure, and obviously if there would be some kind of mutual agreement between Airmate and BPA, you would have to have an end date for that, because
Yes.
that's only fair to everybody, because if the airport comes in 30 years later and says we want to tap in, I mean, that's a different story, but if they come in 5 years.
Yeah, and there's not very many people from, County Road 16 to there. There's one house on the corner,
Right.
so it's not like there's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's
And-
the airport we're talking
Right,
about.
and then if the airport would want to extend, they would have to start from that point and extend it to the end of their property and just pay for that. And it does seem unfortunate. But to be honest with you, just recently, within the last 3 months, we have another request for a water line extension, And if we set a precedent to start extending water lines, we're gonna have to find a new way to budget. I'm just throwing 500,000, although I hate everybody using 500,000 because it sounds absorbent, but it's not. But how much would we have to budget every year for those people that came to us and wanted their water line extended? I just don't know how we could do that without passing that along to the rest of the ratepayers, is my only concern.
Well, the unfortunate thing is, and I don't know how often this happens, you've got 2 requests in a space of a
Yeah.
couple months. I
Right.
don't know how often it
It's
happens.
rare, to be honest with you.
It's rare.
Yes.
But to be honest with you, if I wouldn't have Bryan ties, I wouldn't have stayed in town. I would have moved my factory because of the costs and because it just seems like entities, it's very hard to get cooperation and it's very frustrating. And so unless somebody's willing to go to each meeting and talk to people, make a ton of phone calls and try to get some help, it's not gonna happen. And that's frustrating. You know, I grew up in Bryan. I know most people who live in town still. We have employees who have worked there for years and years and years. We're probably gonna add another 10 employees. We pay about $250,000 in taxes and fees and, you know, employee Bryan city tax. We're growing. We're probably gonna double in size. If we could get some help in this, you know, and, you know, maybe the county pays a third, we pay a third, you pay a third, then you don't have to worry about tap fees and who comes in later. The deal's done, but it seems more equitable than
$500,000.
$500,000.
Carol, I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not sure how to ask you this without being personal, but you're talking about expanding, obviously a new building or whatever, roughly ballpark money?
It's about a $3 million expansion with the
Oh, wow.
building and the equipment. So it's a big stake.
Yeah.
It's a big risk. But I don't think it's a risk because we have all this, you know, we've got, our main company is Kion, that's the parent company, it's a German company, and they're throughout the world, and their US-based branch is Dematic. You probably haven't heard about them, but they're like the second biggest lift builder in the world and one of the largest conveyor systems. So that's why somebody like Amazon's using them. So it's a big deal.
Have you considered or even thought about maybe moving in to the industrial park, building something new?
Yes, we looked at that. It would be, then I'd have to build a new building.
Correct.
The biggest thing is the fire code for plastic storage. If you have a sprinkler system, you can only store plastic 5 feet high. Right now, we're storing it 15 feet high because we have firewalls. So in our existing building, we're able to store that plastic legally in a fire-safe way with the building that we have. So if we moved to the industrial park, we would lose that advantage. And then we'd have to build a building that was maybe 3 times as large and have plastic everywhere. So
So you're grandfathered in on that policy with your current building?
it's
Your
not
new-
grandfathered.
Well, 'cause
We could still build a firewall at the industrial park, but it's, you know, then you've got firewalls and a sprinkler system, and it just keeps the cost, you know, it jumps to about a $5.5, $6 million project.
But your new portion of the building would be under the 5 feet?
No, the new portion, we wouldn't store plastic in.
Okay,
We
okay.
store it in the old portion where it is now, where it's all
Okay.
kosher.
So a quick question, so you
Yeah.
move all the operations then into the new building?
All the cutting machines,
So then the old building then would just become your storage?
warehouse. Yeah.
And how soon, is there a timeline you're looking at?
As soon as
Yesterday?
possible.
Yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday. We ordered our steel last week, and they're not gonna get it. You can't get steel till spring.
Can't
so-
get anything.
Can't get anything. So we're moving as fast as we can, but it's not very fast. But yeah, we would need water,
Yeah.
you know, next
I'm only thinking,
year.
you know, because, of course, we work on a budget, you know, and our 2021
Yeah.
budget's in place. We got caught in a funny spot in 2020 with the COVID,
Sure,
not knowing where we were going.
yeah,
Our budget is tiny.
Well, that's what we have to do. We have to budget for projects that we do. This is not anywhere in our budget. We're struggling to find out how we're gonna pay for this water tower stuff. A couple things.
Yeah.
I talked to you about the size of water service you need. You said you don't use water in production.
Right.
Pretty much, so basically you just need like a 3/4 or 1-inch water line for bathrooms.
Right.
So, that we would have to invest that money for that. I get it's economic development, because believe me, I understand how important it, and I value, what you bring to this community, the jobs and everything else. But as far as a utility standpoint, that's a 3/4 inch water service would cost like $40. There's probably not gonna be a whole lot of growth out there, so then we have to have people go out and flush a dead end water line. The other thing is, I don't know if anybody's even taken this into account, that the engineering services that would go into this, not to mention that we would have to budget for something like this. We would have to change our policy, as far as our rules and regulations would have to be changed to be able to even do that. And the second part is the engineering. I mean, I don't know if anybody's accounted for, I'm just gonna throw a number out there because I don't know what it would cost. But I know that if you ask our department to go out there and engineer a water line, it would take 2 to 3 months for us to go out there. You have to have plan profiles, elevations, then you have to go out in a bidding process, you have to send them off to the EPA and get their approval. All of that stuff takes time. When we do a water line, we prepare for it a year in advance. It's a hard turnaround, to be able to do those things. To drop what we're doing, start the design, have our whole engineering department spend 3 months to design and do plan profiles, send off the EPA, the bidding process. It's a process. And believe me, I think you're worth it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying anything.
Yeah.
I just want people to understand that there's a whole process behind
Sure.
what you're asking, and I'm just throwing it out there just for thought. And how do we accomplish those things, and what those hurdles are? But how do we get to where we get you to stay here? I just want you to understand these different hurdles that have to be accomplished in a short
Yeah.
period of time.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, we deal with that every day. A customer needs this, they need it yesterday. We can't get material for 4 weeks. Material's late, costs extra, we gotta go somewhere else. I know. And I think things move faster as time marches on. People want things turned around faster. Businesses, we order something from Amazon, we can't believe it if it doesn't arrive tomorrow. The world is just moving at a faster pace, and we all have to jump through hoops. And so, yeah, I know. Frustrating.
Nate, is there a possible grant out there for business growth or municipality?
I'm gonna be honest with you, Karen, I'm not really up on all the different grants that are available, but I'm sure that you've checked into some and exhausted what you know about. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not up on all the grants, so I wouldn't know if there is or not, but I'm sure, I know you went to WEDCO and they have a lot of information about how to get some of these
Yeah.
funding and
Yeah,
grants.
so part of the issue is the timeline that Airmate needs. Obviously, you ordered your steel, you needed this expansion yesterday to keep your customers happy. They could possibly look at a USDA loan, but it sounded like it was gonna be an 18-month return on an answer, and she didn't have that kind of time. And to get a grant, you cannot even break ground, start any construction, do anything before you have that money and it's allocated in your hands, or you're in violation and they'll pull it back. So that was one of the issues on why we did not pursue the USDA grant. Outside of that, when we deal with Jobs Ohio, which unfortunately is the only funding mechanism we have with state grants, they only focus on job creation and that kind of growth. And while I agree that you're creating good jobs, it was not enough for RGP on a statewide competition for them to throw any more money at it. And so that is a frustrating hurdle that we have a lot of times. The other piece that I think is important that I have talked to people in the state about is there is some merit in the fact that you're creating more production, more sales tax. You're going to eventually, after the CRA runs out, pay more real estate tax, and that we can't focus solely on job creation, especially in rural Ohio where we don't have enough employees anyway. So I'm trying to start those conversations at a state level, and I'm not the only mayor doing it, where I think their scale and their point system is harming some of us in business. But it's not going to be in time for what you want, unfortunately. So, the short answer, there's, outside of the 50,000 inclusion grant, there's not much out there right now for her.
Now, did Wedco offer?
So Wedco only can offer what RGP or through
Oh,
Maumee
okay.
Valley Planning, and so that, we
That's where
sat
that
down
came.
with the two top people at Maumee Valley, with Megan. I mean, we've had long conversations about this in management. And we literally all kind of threw things at a dartboard, trying to think of anything we could get to you in the next 6 months, and everything had a no. So right now, we don't have a solid, as far as the city side goes, any solid potential for grant funding for this project. Now, we did do the CRA, obviously, which will
Yeah.
help you with the real estate tax abatement.
And I just want to point out that if I had gone to the industrial park, I would be paying 0 property tax. By adding on, I'm still paying tax on my existing building.
Yeah.
So there's still funds going into the city.
Yeah, no, well, most of that goes to the school and the county. I think citywide, it's a little over 400,000 that we collect on property tax, so it's, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But actually, the school and the county kind of pay for those CRAs a little more than we do. And I agree with you that your existing property is still gonna remain the same, but any addition and improvements, you'll halt paying real estate for 10 years.
Right.
So, that right now is the only thing that we had tangible,
Yeah.
based on the construction costs that we certify when the project's.
Yeah, and Carrie's been really good and helpful, and we've talked to a ton of people, and we've had all these ideas, and here we are, and probably the most cost-effective thing for me to do would probably be to go to Indiana. And then you're in a deficit, actually. But I can't have that disruption in production and move my equipment and have that downtime. I can't afford to lose the employees that I have because they're key. And, anytime you relocate, you run that risk. So I could have gone to the industrial park, but it would have been more costly, and we'd been paying no real estate taxes. So this we felt was the best solution. So here we are, and I'm asking for your help on the water line.
I'm not up on the technology of but the board does have basically rights to, if a well would help you, I think it's something that was within their power to, grant a well. It's different out there because there is no water. There's no possibility of a cross connection of a city water and a well. And, but I don't know. At first I heard somewhere that it was 100 and some thousand that you could have gotten these things. I've never heard the 300,000, so I don't know about
Well, we'd
that.
have to put a bigger well in.
Right.
We'd have to have a pretty large tank, and then the pump, there's some kind of a,
Pressure pump, yes.
thank you, I don't understand all of it, but that's pretty costly too.
Okay.
I mean, the cost of those has gone up exponentially.
I just didn't know how far you dug into that because,
Yeah.
the board does have the option to do that. They've done that in the past, but
Yeah.
Your case would be completely different because you're out there where there is no water, no possibility of cross
Yeah.
connection. And if water ever did make it out of there, I mean, it's there to tap into. I'm trying to think of any way I can to help you, reach your goals. I really am, and I'm sure the board is too. And it's
The last thing we want to do, I don't want to lose one employee from the city of Bryan.
Yeah,
I'll do whatever I gotta do. Just thinking out loud, maybe giving you some thought. Would it even be feasible to have two? Have your production in the industrial park and warehouse?
Well, no.
No.
Because we'd have to store our material in this facility and truck it down to the industrial park, and we've got managers running back and forth, and I think it would be pretty hard to manage. Hey, we thought of that too.
Did you? Okay, I'm just,
A little too far for the tow motor.
Yeah, we'd wear out a lot of tow motors. And yes, Carrie's right, the commissioner said, if the city kicks in a third, we'll kick in a third. So I don't know if they're gonna, if you guys say, yeah, we can't do anything.
By the city, I think they meant the utilities.
The utility, yeah.
But, yeah, because there's a difference between a ratepayer, which we're responsible to, and a taxpayer. And, we're responsible to our ratepayers. So in order to be able to do something like that, we would have to change our rules and regulations, our water line extension policy. Because if we set an example of doing it for one, we need to do it for everyone. So it's just something that they need to take into consideration. I mean,
Yeah, well, I mean, and it might be an issue that becomes more prevalent if you've got businesses that need to grow, and that's a part of facilitating it. How far can you go? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, it's, like I said, it's worth them discussing, because ultimately, water line extensions fall to the board's approval. So, I mean, you came to the right place for a water line extension.
Yeah.
It's just up to them to whether they, want to change rules and regulations, and I still think no matter what, you are up against, I mean, have you planned to go out to an engineer and have them do all the engineering for a water line, and how long that would take, and to get all this timeline going?
I don't know. I mean,
Because I'm thinking that's.
You're
right
the
there.
expert.
I'm just saying
Wow.
those are costs that need to be considered, engineering services.
so that's in addition to this quote that you gave me?
Yeah, that was no engineering, and that was just materials, and like if you were to hire a contractor and go out at today's cost with the cost of PVC pipe and time, and to be honest with you, I know that we're ordering some parts, and just the schedule to get them are 6-8 months out. Well, I'm sure you're running into
Yeah.
these similar things.
I
Anybody
know.
that buys anything
I know.
for companies knows that these things are pushed out so far.
Yeah.
So it's like, and maybe I'm, telling you more than you need to know, but I mean, these are all things that need to be considered. That's a tight timeline. I mean, even if things were dropped and done today, it'd be tough to pull that off.
That's what makes this difficult, because you need it yesterday, and,
So what's realistic?
Well, I mean, engineering, it would, if I was to do the engineering in our department, we'd have to drop like I said, drop everything we were doing, and it would take a few months at least to even like get somebody out there, do plan profiles and do the drawings, and
and that's what Nate did for us.
Yeah,
Before he
and-
became the director, so he would know.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think a lot of people take that for granted and don't look like there's a cost to it, but there is. There's a cost to it. And right now, we're getting ready to go into AMI, and our whole focus is on that right now, as far as we're gonna be locked up because we're doing it ourselves to try to save ourselves $500,000 in installation fees. So our water department, our electric department, all those guys are dedicated to buckling down and knocking this out and doing that. So that's what we've focused our time and energy to do, as far
Yeah.
as that. I mean, and that's what I talk about, there's a budgeting process, and usually if something wanted done today, you better budget for it and plan for it next year. That's just how our whole system works with money and budgeting and all those things. I mean, I would love to be able to say, I think a lot of people have the misconception that the utilities is full of money. Well, it's not. I mean, it's a budgeting process, and to come up with more money, it's either to cut something or to raise rates.
Can I ask something, and it's kind of directed to Carol and Nate, and it's truly for my own education piece. I have not seen the quote you got from S&S, but did that include the engineering, or he wouldn't need to worry about it because he can bore underneath?
No,
Is
you
he
still
still
have to
gonna
go
need
to
to
the
do it?
EPA. You have to
Okay.
submit an engineered stamped plans,
Okay.
and you have to go through that whole process. So I don't care who did it, whether the city did it, you guys like Bryan did it, or our
Right.
department did it, or you had some engineering firm. It's months probably to do and prepare to get ready to send them off.
Okay, no, that was the
And
piece I
then
don't
there's
think.
easements.
Well-
That's a county road.
So if that can be, what's the cost? What's the engineering cost?
I hate to give you a number because I remember what happened to the last one, so I'm afraid to say, but to be honest with you, it could be upwards of $30,000
Okay.
to do engineering
Okay.
services for those.
And so if that could be done, and it takes 3 months till that is done, and then how long would it take to put a water line in?
Well, then there's competitive bidding. It'd be a prevailing wage project. You'd have to go out for competitive bidding. Competitive bidding, you probably take a month or more.
Okay.
Because you want it out to contractors to try to get a number back from them. So you want to give them at least, a month to respond to these. And timing is everything on that, if they're busy or they're not busy.
Sure.
Best way to do is get it out in the spring so they can do it, as soon as spring hits, so that they can,
So
have
let's
it
say
up.
in the spring they can start, then how
Well,
long?
then it becomes a materials issue. What's the materials look like? What's the lead times on these materials that you're ordering? Some of this, I don't know, Derek can probably tell you, some of our water valves and different things like that and pipe. Right now, they can't even make enough water line pipe because they can't even set it there long enough to dry in a circle to send it out because that's what's happening with it. They can't even make it fast enough to get it shipped out to these people. So all those things are kind of unknowns, and, the costs are up because of those reasons. The demand is there. So, I don't mean to be, giving you a bunch of bad news. I'm just saying that these are all things that have to be thought out.
So I might not be able to have water by this time next year.
By this time next year, I would say that, no, I would say this time next year you should be able to. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
well.
I mean, depending on, we don't know what the future holds, you know what I mean, to be honest with you, as far as prices and things like that.
I know.
If things settle down, I see that would be possible, because that timeline seems to be about what we plan. I'm just saying, like, when we plan projects, and I did that for many years here, I know how long it takes to accomplish these things. We plan them out the year before, and then we go through those whole processes I just explained.
And then that's not a guarantee, because let's say this COVID thing decides to head north like it's doing, then that puts a kibosh to everything, just like it did in 2020.
Yeah. Then you have inspection processes, even after they're building, you have to have an inspector out there, because if you get a contractor, you're gonna have to, have it inspected. So I'm just trying to give you an idea of what we're in for here.
So should I go somewhere else? Should I leave town?
No,
I mean,
I'm not
that's
trying-
what it
no.
sounds like.
I know, that's why I hate to even tell you
I
these
don't
things,
even want-
but these are hurdles.
Yes.
I know. We all have
And
hurdles.
we need to be realistic about what these hurdles are and how to accomplish them.
Yeah.
And just put them in a timeline that's realistic, that you can meet. That's all. I don't mean to sit there and overwhelm you or frustrate you.
I'm pretty overwhelmed right now.
I apologize.
Well, okay. I guess I need to know if I can get some help financially for this project. And then, right away, I need to know what's the best guess as how soon it can be done, because the steel I have on order that I may need to cancel is coming in February. And so by this time next year, the building would be up and we would be ready to move in, but if we don't have water, we're out of luck.
I mean, you need a really good cost though. I mean, if you read our rules and regulations that I sent you, it basically says that the developer or property owner is responsible to come to us, to the board, and present them with a plan, which I just spoke of, the whole plan of how they're going to extend that water, the engineering for that, the inspection of that, and propose it to the board. Because right now, we don't even know what those costs are. You want us to split something that we're really not sure of. I guarantee it's probably not going to be that 103,000, what was it? Like if they want to split something three ways,
330.
they didn't include those other costs that I just mentioned.
It's probably gonna be a lot more than that.
Maybe not a lot more, but I'm sure that's not the dollar amount that they're looking at. It may be within,
Sounds like they may have jumped without even knowing exactly what they
Or
were
go
jumping
get
into.
real estimates, that one I gave you was just, and it even said, when I gave you that estimate, that this is a rough estimate, not to be used for planning purposes. If I was to go out and do a rough estimate for budgeting purposes, I would use that number, and it's always a little bit high. So your budget's gonna, encapsulate that amount. So, we don't even know real numbers yet, because that's how fast that this is moving for us. We don't even know what those real numbers are.
Well,
Because-
we know it's gonna be somewhere between 350,000 and
350.
500,000.
Yeah, probably a maximum.
Plus engineering.
Right. You're
So
right.
that's a
good-
range.
Yes.
We
it
can
is a
work
range.
with, yeah.
Yep.
Nate, do we have to be involved to the point where we have to buy the materials, do the bid process? Can she go out and hire her own engineer to do the plans, submit them to the EPA? We approve them, of course. Can she hire, can that engineer then hire a contractor to buy the materials and have
In theory, that's exactly what our water line extension process says.
I know.
That they are responsible to do all of those things. Then when it's done and built, we take over the maintenance of the system, just like we would a subdivision. A contractor goes out, builds a subdivision, they put water, sewer, roads, curbs, gutters, everything in there. And then that maintenance of that street, water line, all that stuff comes back to the utilities and we maintain it. We inspect it and we make sure that it's put in towards what we want because we want it to last so nobody can cut corners. But typically it's the same process.
I know it is, but if she does it, we've got our guys, like you said, geared for AMI.
Right.
And so, and your engineering crew is tied up with other projects as well. So if she does that part of it, it won't infringe on our work to the extent that it would if we got involved and did the bid process.
Well,
maybe they wouldn't have to hire prevailing wage, I don't know.
That's part of the reason why the rules and regs are written that way, is because we can't just always drop what we're doing and go do that. I mean, or we have to budget for everything that we do. So that's the reasoning for some of the rules and regs, the way it's written. And in order to change things, the board would have to change the rules and regulations to make an exception for this and completely change how it's done.
Yeah, so I don't know why we would want to change it if she has an option to go out and do it.
Yeah, can I
Get the people
hire an
herself,
engineer,
or,
engineer the
hire the
project?
contractors,
But like
hire
you
the
s-
engineer.
Like you said,
buy
that's
the
basically what the
materials.
rules and regs say, right?
Right, that's exactly
Yeah,
what the rules
I mean,
and regs say.
it's-
That's the process,
I
that
think
it's
very
how it's written.
very similar to what you're describing, Karen.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, if
That's
you're
good.
gonna,
That's
that
another
wouldn't be
option.
government money then, that would be private money.
Right.
That's not what she's here for, she's here for financial help, so I don't think that's the option she's looking for, if I'm not
Okay.
misspeaking.
Well, unless I can proceed or hire S&S boring, get the project going, and you're committing, when we take it over, we'll cover this portion of the cost, just like the commissioners have mentioned.
I don't think we can do that. And we'll have to double check with Rhonda, because when government funds commingle with private entities, it still has the requirement that we have to live under, which is the bid process.
Yep, and the city
and the
would have to take
prevailing
over the
wage.
whole thing, the bidding process, the everything.
And that
about
was
it.
probably the biggest red flag for me when I read the commissioner meeting minutes after you left and they put them online was, I don't even know that it would be S&S, because the truth is, if
Yeah,
the
go out for
city
competitive
gave
bidding.
103 and the county gave 103, whether it was at the beginning or the end, we would have to go through the process of prevailing wage and competitive bid, and then it would be the lowest and best bidder. I don't know who that would end up being. So that was part of my concern when that was the offer on the table, is I knew that would probably then drive the cost up because of all the rules we have to live under.
I don't know what to do.
I would like, Carol, to be fair with you, I'm just speaking for myself. I would love to kind of table this for, of course, not forever.
Thanks.
I'd like to do some brainstorming and maybe we can talk amongst ourselves. Somebody, go to bed at night and think about some other things that we may be missing.
You have to understand that they just hear bits and pieces of it. I mean, as far as that goes, this is kind of their first time hearing some of this stuff, just recently. So that it might take a while to digest it for them to be able to, I know that you had a meeting with Williams County Commissioners, and, I did read the board minutes to try to find out what was said up there, but besides that and a little snippet in the newspaper, I don't know if they even saw the minutes. So this is their first time really hearing it. I think you and I have spoken and we have spoken, but this is the first time the board's hearing a lot of this stuff on their defense.
I mean, it's a lot to take
Yeah,
in
yeah.
in a short
I
amount
know.
of time. I don't want to say, I don't want to look at you and say, Carol, there's nothing we can do.
I know.
Maybe, something,
Yeah.
I go home tonight and go to bed, that's when I do all my thinking anyhow.
Yeah,
Something will pop into my head or something may pop into Karen's or Jim's head, and we get to talking about it.
Well, we wouldn't be very popular if we would do everything that we could possibly do to help you. But as you know, we did this for the last 40 minutes, with the rules and regs, and that's what,
Yeah,
it's going to take some discussion, I think.
sure, I understand.
And like Dick says, maybe something will pop up. It's just hard to say. And time is of the essence for you, but we don't have the option to jump on something like this.
Okay.
I mean, we may be able to think of something. Of course, we have to run it by legal.
Sure.
I don't want to get in trouble. Understand your dilemma.
Yeah.
We will do anything we can.
And your business is important to this community. You've done a lot of good things. I just want you to be aware of that. I mean, I don't want to be a roadblock by any means.
I know, and I know you've got other work, and I'm not the only one out there. But I need to move forward, and
Yesterday.
planning on staying there.
Well, we want you
I
to
need
stay.
water, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're big right now, though. You've got a plan, you've got a good business, you've been here a long time, you're in the city limits. You kind of do come to the surface here and take precedence. So, yeah, we understand your critical need here and want to help any way we can.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, well, we'll
Can I
table
ask
it.
one more question?
Yeah.
Just thoughts that are in my head
Yeah.
at the moment. Is it I know you're asking for assistance, but is it a time factor right now? Or is this something that if there was like an assessment over time, would that be something that could help you?
You mean instead of getting financial assistance right at the outset over time,
Mm-hmm.
would that be fine?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good
Like
idea.
in the course of a loan or an assessment on
Yeah.
taxes.
I think the wheels are
That's
starting
weird.
to turn.
That's what you need to do. You need to plant seeds, and then
Yeah.
hopefully we can all cultivate that and figure out,
Yeah.
solutions. Sometimes, a bunch of people involved
Yeah.
wanting the same thing can maybe come up with different ideas to help you achieve your goal.
Sure, good. Well, can we set a time frame when somebody can get back to me with some ideas?
We'll all be in communications, and I think if we decide something and need to call another, maybe at another meeting, if some decision is made, I guess is about the only thing that I could say, like that would be, a board's decision to make. Like I said, this is their decision, but I think they need to digest it a little bit. And
Okay,
We want to talk to the commissioners, I think,
okay.
We won't say no, we just
Communicate
can't
with
say
them.
yes yet.
Okay. All right, so are you thinking like a couple weeks maybe? What's the time?
I think it's a fair time
Yeah, I
at
think that's
minimum
fair.
next meeting, you
Yeah.
get back to her.
yeah,
Okay.
at least touch base with you so you know where we're at and what we've talked about. and,
Okay.
what was discussed and that kind of thing, even if it's through one of us.
Yeah, that's fine.
And at least point you in the direction that conversations that we're having.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
And on that, I would prefer it be Nate, because I never speak on behalf of the board. Like, just,
Sure,
No, but we all have open lines of communication. We
Yes.
communicate very well.
Yeah.
We have meetings together and department head meetings and stuff like that, so we're all,
okay.
communicate very well together.
Yep.
Anything, Ron, would you and Mayor come up with, please share with us, or
We've got some thoughts, it's
I'll
just
do whatever
getting
I
the
can do to
process.
help you.
Some thoughts.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay,
These are the
thank
kind
you.
of things like Kate Rhonda.
Yeah, I like it.
So for her on an action item, we would hope that the board would be able to address whatever they would need to address by the next meeting, potentially to give her an answer. Is
Yes,
that
I
fair?
think that's fair. I think that's fair.
Okay.
And if there's anything else we can do outside of that, I would directly contact you.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks,
Sarah.
Carol.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is a request to authorize educational assistance.
Good evening. This evening, I am presenting Kevin Douglas for educational assistance. He is attending Northwest Community State College, and he is working on his industrial maintenance mechatronics degree. He has this class and one more class before he has obtained that associate's degree. He has also recently completed the substation certification technician program through Northwestern Lineman College. So he's continuing to move forward. And the request is per the policy and not to exceed $1,200 for the year.
I'm all for
Any questions?
anybody want to
Yeah.
get, and Kevin seems to be extremely aggressive. It's better than himself.
Well, I'd like to make a motion
I'll
to
second.
approve the, yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Annette.
Yes.
Okay. Next is a request to place a water department employee on regular employment status.
Yes, Jimmy Dunning has completed his 6-month probationary status as a water treatment operator 3. So at this time, we'd like to place him on regular employment status. He continues to be a great asset to not only the water treatment team, but the BMU team as a whole.
Congratulations to Jimmy. Very good.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Jim,
Yes.
Annette,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Dick.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next is a request to reclassify a clerk-treasurer's office employee. Sorry.
I am requesting of the board for consideration of Lisa Mormon, account clerk 2 in my office, to be reclassified to the assistant office manager position for payroll. As you know, Sandy will be retiring at the end of January, and Lisa has been in our office and functioning very well for the past 5 years. This would be a step up for her to move over to that position, and we are requesting this to be effective yesterday. It was approved last evening by City Council.
Questions?
I'll let your direction make a motion we approve.
I'll second it.
Dick,
Yes.
Annette,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Karen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next is to effect semi-monthly disbursements and pay the bills. May I have a motion, please?
I'd like to move we pay the bills.
I'll second it.
Karen,
Yes.
Annette,
Yeah.
Jim,
Yes.
Dick.
Yes.
Comments from BP and staff? Dave, how'd you like to start?
Sure. I'd like to thank, and glad Kevin's taken advantage of educating himself, so congratulations to him, and congratulations to Jimmy. I mean, that makes all of our water treatment operators class 3s. It's amazing. I mean, so, I mean, as far as this education process, people taking advantage and getting their licenses, I'm proud of our whole team, so that's about all I have. And congratulations to Lisa, too.
Yeah, first I want to comment on Daryl Bowling's presentation. That was really thorough, really informative, and he did a really great job. I'm sure you and Derek enjoyed working with him and continue that relationship. Council did approve a CRA last night for Airmate, which is a community reinvestment area. Basically, as I kind of explained in the meeting, it would freeze her property taxes for up to a period of 10 years based on the construction cost. So once that building's in and we get the final construction cost, we would certify that through the county auditor. We can't, council doesn't have any oversight over the water line, and that's really where she's struggling. So obviously that's why she came to you this evening. So with that, I have nothing else.
Brenda?
Yeah, and I thought the water tower presentation was great, and I think that's the third one I've sat through.
I was gonna say, I know you sat through a few of
Very
them.
thorough. Good, thank you.
All right.
Not at this time.
Derek? Mr. Betts?
Yeah, normally I don't, but tonight I would agree. I thought that I was very interested in I thought it was very well done and very well explained and very helpful about the water tower. But even more than that, I think your explanation, Nate, for the process and your experience of going through the process helped me, and I'm sure, I don't want to speak for Carol, but I would presume it actually helped Carol to understand that two things. One, that process through your experience was very helpful, but also your sincere and the board's sincere interest in wanting to try and solve the problem, not be a barrier to it, was very enheartening to me. And so I want to thank all of you for that. Once again, I normally don't say anything, but I do feel very strongly that that was a very good presentation. I think you outdid the water tower guy. But also the sincerity of everyone trying and solve the problem. And I think I know a little bit of where Ron's going to go, and I'd like to know a little more about that. But I'm very encouraged by all of us pulling together to make that happen. That's enough. Thanks.
Thank you.
Jackie?
That's nice, sir, thank you.
Annette?
I'm gonna, I've never seen the inside of the water tower, so that was kind of cool to see, and even let alone the top of it. So that was, again, that was very interesting to see, especially in the pictures, and to understand the process. And, I think that this, his name was Daryl. The 10-year plan, I personally think is a very workable solution to keep the towers and in tip-top shape, and also within the regulations that they need to be. So I thought that was very well laid out. Also, congratulations to Kevin for continuous education, to Jimmy for his water department promotion, and then of course Lori to your new assistant. As for the Airmate, that's interesting. Sure, I know parts of the process, but I don't know all of the processes and all the different rules and regulations that have to be followed, so I would be curious to see how this proceeds.
Okay. And for me, I thought that presentation was fantastic. He explained it. It was easy. It was easy to catch on, so it was great. Congratulations to Jimmy and Kevin and Lisa. Going up. I'm genuinely concerned about Carol. I want to do anything I can do. If there is anything, I just need time to juggle it around in my head and see what we can come up with. Maybe we can help, maybe we can't, but we at least got to try. That's all I have. Karen?
I'm going to agree on the water tower presentation, even though I've been through it in the past. Back in '04, I think, is when I first started going through that process. We didn't have the pictures of the top like we did, and I have seen the interior of it before, not personally, just through photographs. So I kind of get the gist of it all over again. I feel like going through it again.
It's just yesterday, Karen.
It was just yesterday, wasn't it?
It's time for that again?
Again. And that's the neat thing about it, is because here we are, still in the right time frame. So it's almost like we already have a great asset management program in place. I know Norm was following the program too, years prior, and his predecessor in keeping them in good shape. So it's almost nothing new. Maybe write something down in a book for the EPA to stamp approved, because we've been maintaining like we're supposed to be. So that's really good. And congratulations to Jimmy, Kevin, and Lisa. They're going to be great assets to both of your departments. And
yep, we'll do what we can with Carol and put on our thinking caps and see what we can do. I mean, maybe there's ways we can, you know, subsidize some way. You know, do what we can and she do what she can and everybody go together. I don't know, maybe the Port Authority can really, you know, put their hat on and come around with some more better understanding instead of a big no. And that might be wrong to say, but you know, that's where she's at out there, and we would be helping them out in the long run if they needed to tap into it for airplane safety and their insurance purposes. So having sprinkler system while an airplane is under insurance. So a lot of things to think about and a lot of points to make and see where we can go. And thanks, John, for your kind comments. Yeah, we'll help out any way we can to help her stay in Bryan, I think. That's all I have to say.
Well, I too would like to congratulate Kevin, Jimmy, and Lisa. Also, the presentation, I think, was fine. It seems, it's a little bit reassuring to know that there's a projection out there that we can deal with as far as maintaining these. And he seems to have a program that we could live with. As far as the Airmate situation goes, I'm thankful you're here for your experience, if nothing else, because, I mean, let's face it, you had all the answers.
I don't know if they were answers, but they were challenges.
Maybe
that
not
people-
exactly,
Yeah.
maybe not what she wanted to hear, but I don't think we're in a position right now to commit to anything. So, I mean, I think it was very well handled. I'll leave it at that. And that's all I have. So with that, the board will go into executive session to discuss compensation of public employees and to discuss acquisition of property. I would like to ask the mayor, Rhonda, Lori, of course Nate, and Jackie, and of course the board to stay. And with that, we'll take a brief recess to go into executive session.